Please help me welcome J Loren Norris.
There's an old question I remember asking when I was a kid. I asked the guy at the nursery, not where the babies are, but where the trees are. I said, how long will it take me to grow a tree in my front yard that I can actually put a swing in and grow and play in it? And the guy told me, well, the best time to plant a tree is 25 years ago. The next best time is today. And I want to say that building rapport in the sales cycle is very much like that. That's what I want to talk about in this episode of Leading Leaders.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom.
I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast, and I spent a lot of time training communicators how to be better communicators, how to tell better stories better. And one of the questions that I run into often is people ask the question, where in my speech, in my talk, in my presentation, whether it's a webinar or it's a sales talk or it's a motivational speech or it's a leadership training speech, where in that structure of the speech do I build rapport? And here I believe is what is in their head. If there was a room full of 50 sales trainers or sales leaders, we would probably have 150 different answers. But I believe most people are asking the question, when should I connect with the audience? Is it early on in the speech? Is it in the middle of the speech? Is it near the end of the speech when I'm making my offer? Is it when I'm trying to get them to do the thing that I want them to do? And be honest with yourself. It doesn't matter if you're selling a product, a service, or a philosophy. If you're conveying an idea that you want other people to adopt, action you want other people to take, something you want them to believe, to do, to purchase, or just to buy into, you've got to be able to connect with them, not just through the logic of their mind, but through the emotions of their heart. There's another word for that. Now, I want to put in this category a lot of different techniques and tricks and tips and manipulation have been woven through the idea of connecting with the heart of people. In fact, there are a lot of ways that are identified as neurolinguistic programming, as emotional movement. I've heard some people say they want to invoke emotions in others. I think that's a bad idea, and if you were to ask me directly, I can explain why. To evoke emotions from someone, that I believe that's the right direction to go. And again, ask me directly in a DM or send me a message, and I'll be glad to answer that question. But the concept of building rapport, that's nothing new under the sun. Everybody's been talking about building rapport. We hear things like mirror neurons. If they touch their chin a lot, you should touch your chin a lot. If you want them to touch their chin and they don't, then you should start it. If you wipe a little something from the corner of your eye as you speak of something emotional, you're more likely to cause them to feel emotional. And those mirror neurons, they're natural. There's not a whole lot you can do about them. In fact, you may catch yourself doing something the other person is doing and then realize, why am I even doing that? Crossing my arms, leaning back from the table, wandering off into space while I talk. And the chances are you're doing it because, well, they're doing it. And the mirror neurons in you are firing off to say, I'm trying to imitate the person across from me. Now, some people are very conscious of that. They've been trained in sales and argument or debate, and so they know how to position themselves differently when you try to use mirror neuron techniques on them. When you try to linguistically take them down a path that they don't really want to go down, they'll intentionally interrupt you, break your sales thought, ask questions that are irrelevant to the thing that you're saying. And they're doing it either consciously or subconsciously because they're doing all they can to not connect deeply and emotionally. As a kid, I did it. I wasn't even trained in anything. It was just my natural reaction to be a smart aleck. And I remember an old guy telling me a story one time that was supposed to encourage me. It was on a day that I had been hit in the face with a baseball. It was a pop fly, went right into the sun. And when I put my glove up, the ball came over the top of the glove and hit me right in the end of my nose and my upper lip, and my whole face was swollen. And I was like, I'm done. I hate baseball. I never want to play again. And I went off the field in my uniform to sit in the stands. And this friend of my stepdad starts, I would say, lecturing me. I think he was just trying to encourage me. He was telling me a story. And as he's telling me this story, I'm like, I've heard that one before. I don't even care. I was 7. I hadn't heard it before. I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea what he was talking about. I just wanted to interrupt him so he would shut up. I wasn't ever trained in that. That was just a natural reaction. What was the whole point, though? He wasn't connecting with me. I didn't want to be connected with, but every effort he made was just annoying me more, and that was annoying him. And there's an old phrase that says, don't argue with the pig. All it's going to do is get you muddy and annoy the pig. It's going to frustrate you and annoy the pig. Why bother? There's something about building rapport, though. When people ask me that question, where in my talk does it begin? Is it, do I start building rapport from the minute I start talking? Or do I start building rapport when I get to my first main idea? Or do I start building rapport just before my call to action? Or do I put the call to action out there, that kind of transactional opportunity? Click on this, buy this, join this. Here's the time to sign the papers, test drive the car, whatever it is. Is that where I build rapport? Do I build rapport after that offer's been made and they either did take action or they didn't? Where in that process of the talk or the sales process should I build rapport? And I'm going to give you an answer that has been my observation over about 30 years of leadership training and sales. And I spent several years in sales for Fortune 50 companies and in marketing for Fortune 50 companies. And none of this was really talked about even then. Early on, there were a couple of different sales trainings that I took with Bally's, with Q, with GTE, with Verizon. Those are big name companies that do a lot of sales, by the way. And in all of them, they had what they called the needs assessment or the questioning phase. And you don't want that to feel like 20 questions. You don't want it to feel like an interrogation. You want it to feel like a conversation. And yet, every one of them had this very specific list of questions that pertain only to their products or services. So by the time you're done, it's like playing 20 questions. You're asking questions that are specific to, would you want to join? Who's going to support you? You're asking questions that are trying to overcome objections. You're asking questions that are getting them to reveal the secrets to why they would buy. What are their motivations about your product or service? And so those questions are very intricate. They're intentionally designed to craft an answer, a feeling, an emotion, a thought process, which will lead internally to the conclusion of the buyer that this is the best offer they're going to get. It's the best price. It's the best service. Nobody out there offers what we offer you. You're not going to get this deal anywhere and get the kind of results that you're going to get here. And the questions are crafted to lead them to that conclusion, sometimes without you even having to say it. They want you to feel like you're making the right choice, even before the offer is made, to make a choice. That's a good set of questions. That's a great needs assessment. You want to know everything there is to know about your customer that's going to cause them to either buy or not buy. And then you want to make an offer that matches their wants, needs, desires, plans, goals, strategies. You want to make sure that what you craft for them works. Now, in an individual sales process, that makes good sense. It's pretty easy to use a needs assessment with well-crafted questions that get targeted answers with intentional direction behind them. How do you do that from the stage? How do you do that on a webinar, on a seminar, when you've got a crowd of people around you? Obviously, you're not going to take the time if there are 25 people in the room or 250 people in the room or 2,500 people or 25,000 people. You don't get the time to ask each one of them individually. So how then do you get to know them in a way that you know that the way you position or place or pronounce your offer to them, that it makes sense to them, that they look at it and go, ooh, that is a good idea. I think that would serve me well. You don't get to ask all of those questions. So how do you get to the place where you feel like they know you, they know your offer, they know your product, they know your services, and you know them well enough to know that what you're about to offer them makes sense for them. It's a good idea for them. It's a philosophy that will improve the quality of their life. It's transformation that they're longing for. How do you know that if you don't get to ask them questions? Well, There are a couple of ways that people do that in mass selling. They start with a focus group. And so they look for a slice of people, a demographic of people, a representation of people. And they'll say, of this group, their demographics are similar. Their education levels, their backgrounds of family life or different types of family life, their religious backgrounds, their education levels, how far did they go in school, where did they go to school, what did they study? All of these things kind of come into the mix, and they're like, okay, so we have this segment of people, a segment of the population, and if we ask them these 10 questions and they all answer the same, then we know that, in theory, that segment of the population, that age, that race, that gender, that education level, they think like this. That's what a focus group does. What do you think of the colors of this logo? What do you think of the price point of this product? What do you think the outcome of this event will be? And as you get the answers to those questions, your hope is that that focus group genuinely represents the marketplace that you want to take this product to. Now, you might find that in doing this focus group that the age range, the demographic, the income level, the education level, that those people look at your product and they're like, whatever. And so now you have to make a couple of choices. Am I going to change the product to match the focus group and what their opinions were, what their thoughts were, what their wants and needs and desires are? Or will I keep the same product and offering, the same idea, the same philosophy, the same sales strategy? Will I keep that same thing and shift my attention to another slice of the population? Well, then you've got a focus group again. And you've got to go back and ask other people until you find a group of people that go, yay, we love it, we want it, that's exactly what we've been longing for. And then when you find them, you find all the other people like them in that slice of the population, and that's who you present your product to. See, knowing that about launching a new product or launching a new service, really what we're saying is long before we present it to anyone, we want to know what everyone thinks about it. Let me say that in a different way. If you feel like while making your presentation, you've got to figure out where in the presentation building rapport fits, I hate to say it, but I think you're way too late. I think you're way too late. You haven't asked enough questions before you took the stage. You haven't asked enough questions before you turned on the webinar. You haven't taken the time to observe your potential client in their natural habitat. You don't know how they're going to react to your offer, your sales pitch, your sales strategy, your product or service, simply because you don't know them at all. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked with a speaking client who says, well, I just want to tell my story. I just want to get on the stage and tell everybody what happened to me and what my life was about and how I can help them. I'm like, well, that's fine. And it is a strategy. Personally, I don't think it's a good one. I think your story is a drill bit. It's just a tool. And it's the tool that helps them achieve a different goal. It helps them get to another end result. A lot of people will say things like, your story sells. No, it doesn't. It might be a sales tool, but very few people want to buy your story. Trust me, I've interviewed people on unbelievable journeys of life, but people who spent 38 years in prison wrongfully. Great book, great guy, great story, great presentation, and he's good at what he does. But it's not an international bestseller, and he doesn't get $25,000 every time he steps on the stage, even though his story is incredible. He still has a full-time job. He still does other things. One who met face-to-face with a grizzly bear when it was trying to eat his brother, and he fought it off. Oh, he spent a long time in the hospital. Well, that's an incredible story. That's like being bitten in half by a shark. But you still have to market that story. You have to find the people who want to hear that story, and whether it's a story of triumph or it's a story of overcoming or it's a story of fighting through the physical health battles of everything that came after, or it's just a story of faith that said, God stood with me in that battle against the bear. Whatever the story is about, there's an audience for that story. And until you watch them, observe them in their natural habitat and figure out what do they want, need, and desire, and then ask yourself, will this story meet their wants, needs, and desires? Will it inspire them, encourage them, move them in a direction? Selling the story is going to be really hard. I find most people, I don't mean this to be an indictment, but it kind of is. Most people that tell you your story sells want to charge you to tell it. They do. I've met them. I wouldn't, but I could give you the name of 4 or 5 right now that if you give them $3,000 or $4,000, they'll put you on their stage in front of their audience, which is 25 to 30, maybe 100 other people who are paying for the opportunity to tell their story as well. And what they're going to tell you is being on this platform, getting this video, getting this promotion material, that's what's going to make you wealthy. Usually doesn't. But they're making money telling you that your story sells. They're selling you your story. That's what they're doing. It's not what I find to be true. But they've found you in your natural habitat. And they've identified your wants, needs, and desires. Your want, your need, your desire to get on the stage and share your story, to publish a book. Again, there's another whole slice of the population of consumers and business owners who come together in that place where they say, I want to tell my story. Well, great, I'm a publisher. I can help tell your story. I will help you craft it and make it an international bestseller. I'll put you on the top of the Amazon list in your category, which means you probably sold 500 books in a couple of days' time. And that's awesome. But even if your book's $1,000 a piece, that's only a year's worth of income for most people, maybe a couple of years. But you're not going to sell a book for $1,000. And having a book isn't necessarily going to put you on the stage in front of tens of thousands of people and make you $25,000 a speech. Again, there are people who will sell you that idea. It's just not true. They're making money off of your story. There's no guarantee that your story is going to sell. I've heard some incredible stories. I've worked with some people who have some incredible background, incredible educations, incredible experiences. I sat face to face with a guy while we were producing someone else's interview show, and he told us about the time that he was in the Hanoi Hilton for over 5 years. Holy cow, what a story. That was an incredible story. He still worked all of his life. And even the publishing of his book, most people don't have it. Most people don't know it. It's an incredible story. It's not a common story. But it's not the kind of story that everybody runs out to buy. I listened to an interview recently with a guy who wrote the 600-page book about Bonhoeffer. And recently they just released a film about Bonhoeffer. Well, this is a guy who lived an absolutely incredible story almost 100 years ago. And the story's just now becoming a big fat book, becoming a story that's film worthy. Is your story going to sell? Well, maybe. But here's the real question. At what point in your presentation on the stage, at what point in your relationship with your potential audience, buyers, people whose lives you're transforming, do you need to build the rapport that says, you know, like, and trust me. I know, like, and trust you. I know what your wants, needs, and desires are, and I have a way to fulfill them. Listen close. Here's the answer to that question before you ever start crafting the speech. It's not just a focus group that says, who are these slice of people who want the thing that I have to offer? That's a huge part of it. That's your demographic research that should start long before you put your presentation together. But even if you've got your product already nailed down, you've got your services already nailed down, you have a pretty good idea who your client is, the stories that you tell, that's how you build rapport. There's a reason I tell all my coaching clients, you should have 100 stories. Not because your life is 100 little fragmented pieces, although many of us live a life that looks much more like stained glass than a pane glass window. There are little fragments of different colors that make up our life. Those are each little stories. And each of those little stories connect with a different group of people. Connect with a different target audience. If your main idea, if your main point, if your main thread, your main offering, your main philosophy, your main product or service could genuinely serve a lot of people, the way that you're going to reach that lot of people is by understanding which ones like the maroon colored glass and which ones like the teal and which ones like the gold trim and What part of your life story needs to resonate with that individual group of people? That's when and how you build rapport. It starts in the research of asking, who are these people that I'm going to present to? What's important to them? What key factors in their life correlate with the key factors in my life? What are the emotions that will inspire them to take action? What's going to cause them to move, to do, to get involved, to invest financially, emotionally, and with their time? And if I get my hands around that and I can identify the story that in my life is a real, true experience, an authentic, integrous story, that particular segment of the audience will look at and go, that's just like me. I went through the same thing. I know exactly how that feels. To lose a parent, to lose a child, to be in the middle of a heartache in my life and have someone come along and sweep me off my feet. I know what that feels like. That's the story that builds rapport. So when do you start building rapport? The minute you start bringing your product to life, you start looking for those audiences and asking yourself, what are the things that inspire, that motivate, that move them? And how do I find that story in my life? In the story power process, I call that story selection. You've got to start, before you even start organizing your speech, identifying the stories in your life that will move others, and then asking yourself, who's the audience that most deeply resonates with? What are the emotions that it evokes in them? What call to action fits with that to get them to say, yes, I'm in, I want to do that? If you don't start with your story selection, then crafting the talk is just an exercise in futility, in my opinion. There are a whole lot of speeches that I've given that at the end people are like, and then there are speeches that I've given that people want to line up at the end and all they want is a hug. They don't want to buy anything. They just want to connect with the person that connected with them. And then there are speeches that I've given that people are at the end going, take my money. And the difference in those is, what stories have you chosen to tell to connect with the audience that motivates their action, that causes them to go, I'm in, I want to do this. Whatever it takes, I'm in. If you don't do your homework up front, you won't choose the stories to tell that build rapport. You begin building rapport as you research the audience that you intend to talk to. That may not always be the audience you're in front of. It may only be 10% of the audience you're in front of. But if you know who it is that you intend to connect with and you know the direction you want to take them, then you need to ask yourself early on, what are the stories from my life that will move those people in the right direction? You start building rapport before you start lead generation. You start building rapport when you look into the world and you say, these are the people I want to serve and how I'm going to move them. Who do you serve and how? If you haven't answered that question yet, you're not ready to start building rapport. If you have answered that question, then you're in the beginning stages of the process of building rapport. Next, you've got to start selecting the stories you'll tell that will move them. Then we can craft them into a presentation where people feel that every step along the way, they've been invited to something greater. And they want to join you. They want to take action. They want to buy from you because they've already bought in to the who that you are. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'm J Loren Norris with Leading Leaders Podcast for Tell It Like It Is TV. And if you're interested in any of the stuff that I've talked to you about today with regard to story, leadership, influence, check out storypoweracademy.com, because that's where we make it available to anybody who wants to dive in. Have a blessed day.
Subscribe now for our extensive video library of leadership lessons promoting faith, family, and freedom. I encourage you to go to storypoweracademy.com and check it out. Look at the different classes, the different levels, the different things that are available. You can take a lot of them a la carte. But spend some time there and see if that's the kind of thing that would change the way you communicate as a leader, as a pastor, as a counselor, as a political leader. And if that will help you, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Again, only 10 people in the elite speakers. You will have to apply for that. But if you're a candidate, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'm J Loren Norris with Story Power Academy. I look forward to seeing you inside.